March 25th, 2024 meeting of the East Penn School District Board of School Directors. Will you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce our monthly attendees from the EHS Student Government Association to give their report. We have Ms. Patel and Ms. Samer.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. In athletic news, both the boys and girls basketball teams wrapped up their seasons earlier in March during the first round of state championships. Congrats to the team for making it so far and for an impressive season. The girls and boys swim teams did great at their final states meet at Bucknell. The track and field team has their next meet at home tomorrow against Central. The boys baseball team had a home game today against Allen, and the girls softball team took on Allen today at home as well. The boys tennis team took home the victory against Stroudsburg on Friday. Their next match is on Wednesday away at Pocono Mountain West. On Thursday, the girls lacrosse team lost in a close game against Easton. Their next game is tomorrow against Central at home. The boys lacrosse team beat Easton during their home opener pink out game on Friday. They will be taking on Central tomorrow.
Thank you, Jelena. Next up, we have some great club and organization news. Many members of Emmaus High School's Model UN team competed at Lehigh University. Oscar Sivak and Jackson Kreiner earned first and second place medals respectively. Congratulations to all who competed. Science Olympiad Club competed in the regional competition at Kutztown University on March 12th. The team earned 8th place and qualified for the state competition in April. The chess club team had an impressive performance at last week's competition with many state qualifiers from Emmaus. The Emmaus High School production of Roger and Hammerstein's Cinderella was incredible this past week. The cast, crew, and pit did a fantastic job. The hard work and dedication to the arts was extremely evident in every student and teacher part of the musical. The Emmaus High School Shape for the Brave event will be happening on April 26, 2024. The event's goal is to raise $100,000. Please consider supporting the efforts by donating, purchasing a t-shirt, or having your head shaved. Habitat for Humanity Club filled Easter eggs for Habitat Humanity families in the area. The Ski and Snowboard Club just wrapped up a successful and fun season, and now the Outdoor Adventure Club will be hosting a rock climbing event at Reading Rocks. And lastly, the Science Fair Club presented their projects at the Pennsylvania Junior Academy of Science. Many first place and perfect scores were received by the students, and they will be presenting their projects at Penn State University in May. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
I have a comment.
Yes, Ms. Klotz.
I would just like to second my appreciation of Cinderella. Excuse me. It was amazing. I loved it. Everybody around me loved it. So it's a great job.
Okay. Thank you. I think many board members attended the show and enjoyed themselves. Any other comments? Okay, so as usual, you're welcome to stay for the remainder of the meeting, but if you have other endeavors you'd like to pursue tonight, you're free to go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda, a request to address the board. We have one this evening. Before I call this person's name, I'd like to read the following statement. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with public comment, speakers should feel free to express their opinion, comment, or question, and understand that this is not an interactive engagement with the board or with the administration. Please direct your comments to the chair, be respectful, not engage in profane rhetoric, and be mindful that others, including students, may be listening. I would request that you consider that protocol when making your comments. For the members of the audience, please also be respectful and refrain from speaking during the public comment period. With that, I will now announce our speaker and that person's topic. When you step up to the podium, again, state your name, and you will have 3 minutes within which to speak, and I will give you a 30-second warning. Tonight, we have Chad Stuckey here to talk about parking.
Good evening. Yes, my name is Chad Stuckey. Appreciate the opportunity to address the board. Just wanted to speak on behalf of the non-senior students and their parents regarding the current parking situation. I'm sure everyone's aware right now that only seniors have parking permits. And while I get that with their seniority, it's creating a huge issue primarily for the juniors. And so wanted to talk that through. We realize that this is not going to get resolved tonight, but our intent is to try to get in front of the school administration to talk out some potential options of what we can do. And we think we do have some options. But we have been reaching out, trying to get a dialogue going, and have not been able to get anything to happen. And so that's why we're addressing the board tonight. One of the problems we have is that the only option for the juniors and for sophomores that can drive is pretty much on Pine Street, which only allows for about 40 spaces. And so these kids are having to get up at about 5 o'clock in the morning, get there about 6, and then wait for about an hour, hour and 15 minutes before school starts, which, as you can imagine, is not convenient. It's particularly tough for these students that are student athletes, or they're students that have jobs who need their cars immediately after school, or for students that will be sticking around until after their athletic event, 7, 8 o'clock at night. So this is they have to have their cars. And part of the problem is that now they get home, they do their homework, and then they got to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And so, as you can imagine, it adds a lot of stress to the kids. And then, of course, we as parents get stressed. So we wanted to see what we could do. So we have a number of options that we're looking at. One is to take a look at the J lot, which is no longer available to these students. And we get this. We understand that Emmaus is not exactly ideal for parking. A lot of neighborhoods, not a lot of land. We get it. But we do see that the J lot, we've had students and parents go by, take pictures, take video. There seems to always be a lot of spaces available in the J lot. And then we thought we might be able to work something out with the school administration, maybe the borough, to see what we could do about some of these local neighborhoods to limit the number of permits, but to allow some of the students to park there as well. So again, just wanted to raise this. And the idea is to talk with the board, to raise the attention and try to get in front of the school administration to talk through these problems, because we've been trying. Kids continue to get stressed. And as you also probably know,
30 seconds.
Thank you. They only allowed 3 strikes. And so they get tickets. We have to pay those tickets. And after the third, they're basically told that they do not get to get a senior parking pass. So anything we can do to address this, I think we have options. We understand they're limited, but it'd be great to talk this through. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, that concludes public comment. Next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. I have a motion to approve the minutes from the March 11th meeting.
So moved. Second.
Are there any comments or questions from the board? Seeing none, Ms. Allen, please call the roll.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Falegi?
Aye.
Ms. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Ms. Klotz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Next on the agenda is the district update. Dr. Campbell.
Good evening. Thank you. We're going to start off this evening with recognition of several talented student authors from the Stinger. And so I'm going to start off just by talking a little bit about the Student Keystone Media Awards. This is a contest that recognizes high school and college journalism and provides relevance, integrity, and initiative in serving their readers. Any student at a public, private, high school, college, or university who has their material published in their school newspaper is eligible to enter the contest. So I say that because there are many eligible participants for the Keystone Media Awards. Students who had their work published on a digital news site may enter the contest provided that the site meets the criteria outlined by the Keystone Media Award. And awards will actually be formally presented on April 11th, but we wanted to take some time this evening to congratulate the 2024 Student Keystone Media Award winners, several of which are from Emmaus High School. And so I'm going to go through the individuals. I'm actually going to move over to the podium, and if you don't mind, I know that these amazing students are here, and so I invite them to come up and receive a certificate. All right, the first journalist who we'd like to recognize is Zoe Hoolings. And Zoe earned second place in the general news category. I'd also like to invite up Ayan Shaw and Karina McCallum, who also received second place for ongoing news coverage. Congratulations, Anna. Oh, here's another one. We'd also like to honor Claire Easum, who also earned second place in the cartoon and graphic illustration.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. And Kira Davies earned an honorable mention in the Public Service Enterprise category. We'll recognize her. I don't think she was able to come. And then finally, we also had a special category winner. AT&T sponsors a High School Diversity Champion Award. And again, we're so very proud of Ayan Shaw, who received that award as well. Also want to recognize with us tonight is Mr. Shaw, who is one of our faculty advisors of the Stinger, and Ms. Ramirez. I'm not sure if she's able to be here, our other faculty advisor. So we're so very proud of our students and their outstanding accomplishments. Really quite impressive, as well as the work of our faculty advisors. And for those in the audience, I sincerely appreciate our families who came out to support your students this evening, and know that you have always continued to support your students in the work that they're doing, whether it's academically, in extra and co-curriculars, and certainly in their work as student journalists as well. So we continue to appreciate your support. And one final plug for any member of our audience: if you haven't picked up a copy or gone online to check out the Stinger, you're missing out. It's really just a top-notch publication, and I think you would really enjoy everything that our students are putting forth in terms of their content. So please be sure to check it out. So congratulations again. Really embarrass you with a picture now. Yeah. All right, I'm going to continue with some additional student accomplishments. This past weekend, as Elizabeth mentioned during our student update, East Penn officially concluded its spring theater performances for the season. And so I wanted to just, on behalf of the district and our administration, express how incredibly proud we are of the theater department at Ayer for their performance of Mean Girls Junior, Lower Macungie Middle School with The Wiz, and again, just recently closing out this weekend, Emmaus High School with Cinderella. We're truly so very fortunate to have such amazing and talented students in the cast, the crew, our pit, the dedicated staff that we have directing our students in these productions, as well as just the many volunteers who make these performances truly remarkable. I know that many board members have had an opportunity to see one or all of those performances. I think Cinderella was like sold out almost every single performance. So again, it was just kind of a great culmination to a really successful season for us in terms of our theater productions across the district. And I'm also really proud to say that many of our elementary schools have shows that they'll be putting on this spring. So please keep your eye out on some of the elementary schools. We have drama clubs that happen in many of them, so that'll be exciting. I also wanted to congratulate the Emmaus High School academic team members, Ryan Begg, Sarvesh Sangudavan, Elias Gopin, and Aiden Cannon, for their fantastic performance at the Science Bowl competition that was held at the Princeton Plasma Lab. And speaking of Ryan Begg, we're very proud of the fact that just this weekend he earned his Eagle Scout, which, as you know, is quite an honor and a tremendous accomplishment for Ryan. And so we're very proud of him and not only his work with the academic team, but earning his Eagle Scout badge this weekend. I'd also like to congratulate the Emmaus JV hockey team. They won the Phantoms Cup Scholarship Championship that happened earlier this month. So great job to them. I think Elizabeth may have mentioned this. The EHS Model UN team did a fantastic job at Lehigh University. We had 20 Emmaus High School students who competed. Jackson Kreiner earned second runner-up, and Ashka Sivak secured first place. Speaking of Jackson Kreiner, he was a recipient of the Widener University High School Leadership Award, and this award is based on students' civic contributions and leadership within their school and community. You might recall Jackson Kreiner was actually one of our student mentors who came and spoke about the mentoring program at Emmaus High School. In addition to his work with the mentor program, he's vice president of the French Club, president of the Model United Nations, secretary of the Young Democrats, as well as a member of National Honor Society. So you can see where certainly he was well deserving of that recognition from Widener. Just today, it was announced that the following Emmaus High School students were nominated as the EPC Winter Sports Scholar Athletes. So I wanted to recognize them. Tegan McCourt from our boys basketball team, Julia Adams from our girls basketball team, Jelena Patel, sorry that she left already, from cheerleading, Madison Carrero from rifle, Logan Shriver from boys swimming, Georgia Magditch from girls swimming, and Scott Furness from wrestling. Earlier this evening, Mrs. Garriello and I had the pleasure of attending the Girls of the Month recognition program that's sponsored by the Emmaus Women's Club. We honored 7 young ladies from Emmaus High School for their outstanding accomplishments both in school as well as the community. So it was a real pleasure to celebrate Angela Tran, Ashlyn Mugavero, Claire Sheehan, Kayla DiGiacomo, Lorelei Kilka, Michaela Fox, and Paige C. Also, a little bit of a repeat. Shout out to our Emmaus High School chess team for their great job. They competed in 5 rounds in a statewide tournament over the course of 2 days. And I'm thrilled to say that Dallin Allport, Luke Doherty, Thomas Amador, Luke Doherty, Ethan Park, and Zinning Fan, Aiden Cannon, and Ethan Amy all walked away with trophies as members of the chess team. So great job to them. Some general announcements for the district. Some of these are going to be repeats, so bear with me, board members, but if we have new community members tuning in, we always want to remind them of the fact that kindergarten registration is open. please check out the district website. The sooner we have our kindergarten students register, the better, so that we can fully build our classes for next school year. We have a lot of hiring going on in the district, including our summer maintenance and technology positions. Those applications are due by April 5th. We are also seeking for members to join our food service staff, and we have openings for crossing guards in the borough of Emmaus to support students at Lincoln and Jefferson. So you can check out our district website for the application process for any of those positions. I'd also like to share that Carbon Lehigh Intermediate Unit is now opening up applications for the guest teacher program. This is for anyone who has a bachelor's degree and might be interested in learning about a day in the life of a teacher and considering coming in and working in a school district as part of a guest teacher. So if you visit the CLIU website, you can learn more about how you might take your bachelor's degree and use it to become a guest teacher in a local school district, preferably in East Penn. Some quick reminders: tomorrow, March 26th, the Education Foundation is sponsoring its annual Career Exploration Fair. It's going to be 6 to 8 p.m., the high school gym. You don't want to miss it. A great opportunity to explore many, many careers, talk directly and engage in discussion with people who are in various industries and can help you to perhaps navigate some of those career choices that you have over the next several years. We're also excited for a new event that's being held in the district. The Emmaus High School Mud Club, in collaboration with the National Art Honor Society, is offering a pottery palooza on the afternoon of April 20th. It's held at Emmaus High School. You'll have to sign up, and our students from those two clubs that I mentioned will be guiding participants through the steps of making a bowl. The workshop's open to students, faculty, community members, and so you'll make the bowl on April 20th, and then you can pick up your artwork on May 23rd, which is the night of the Emmaus High School Art Show. So certainly an event that you're not going to want to miss, and you could take your bowl with you on that day. Final announcement that I have for the community is, as we begin to navigate through the spring, it becomes a really busy time for wrapping up the year and thinking ahead to next school year. Our middle schools are offering a family information night for rising sixth graders for next year. That will be held at Eyre and Lower Macungie Middle School, respectively, on May 8th at 6:30. So this is really just a reminder to current fifth grade families to start paying attention to a lot of that information that's coming out, including taking a look at elective music classes for next year, and again, being sure that you begin to participate in some of those orientation nights that we have planned. And that's all I have for my update. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. Are there any comments or questions from the board?
I just had one comment. I definitely wanted to congratulate all of the schools on their theater projects. I too got to see Cinderella. Amazing, amazing. And I also wanted to point out that Ryan Bagg, who became an Eagle Scout, was actually here. I see you. Congratulations. And his mom.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ford. Mr. Jankowski.
I'd just like to make a comment about the parking situation we've heard about tonight. When I was a student here a couple years ago, I used to park on Burger Street, not because of a lack of parking, but because I was lazy and my homeroom was in the front of the building. So, any discipline I received then was warranted. I do think it's unfortunate that our students are put in a position where they're getting ticketed, they're potentially having their parking privileges revoked, that they're having to come here at those hours just to get parking. I do think it's important that the administration tries to figure out what options are available to help accommodate the students. Parking is not necessarily a right, it's a privilege, but I do think it's unfortunate that our students are put in the situation that they currently are. So I'd like to see what can be done for that.
Okay, thank you for the comment. Any other Comments from the board? Okay, Dr. Campbell, thank you for the report. The next item on the agenda is another installment in our budget presentation process. Tonight, we're going to get part one of the 24-25 budget priorities. Dr. Campbell, would you like to introduce? Or present, I should say.
Right, good evening. I get to enjoy things from the other side this evening. Just a quick reminder about our budget timeline. You can see that we've had a series of 4 presentations so far. Tonight, we're focusing on our first set of budget priorities that are being proposed to be included as part of the 24-25 budget. You can see we will continue with our budget priority presentations next month, the first meeting in April. And I also wanted to point out, Mr. Saul at that April 8th meeting is also going to give us a budget update. So you might see some slight changes to what was originally presented in the previous meetings. And then we begin to take a look at the adoption of the final proposed budget, the proposed final budget, the second meeting in April, and finally, ultimately adopting a final budget at our June meeting. The budget priorities that are being presented this evening, you'll see the listing of them here on this slide. I want to start off by emphasizing that these priorities have been identified through a collaborative process that includes our district as well as our building leaders. They are certainly, these items are all aligned with our comprehensive plan goals, other larger instructional and programmatic priorities that you've certainly heard a lot about over the course of not just the past year, but several years. And then you'll notice as I go through them in just a minute, there is also attention to the K-8 realignment. And phasing in those positions as we had originally planned and discussed back in our October meeting. The positions, again, include 3 English language arts interventionists, a STEP teacher, 4 student advisors, 2 board-certified behavior analysts, sometimes referred to as the acronym BCBA, a school psychologist that would in essence be shared among currently we have a school psychologist who's shared between Emmaus High School and Albertus, and so the addition of a position would allow a full-time psychologist at Albertus and a second full-time psychologist at Emmaus High School. We're also proposing 2 teachers for Emmaus High School, one in English language arts and one in math. 2 special education teachers, which at this point in time we believe will be at the elementary level. 3 new instructional assistants to support the special education teachers in classrooms. We'll also in a future presentation be talking about transitioning 6 current instructional assistant positions, which are all currently part-time, and making those positions full-time. We're proposing the addition of a school counselor. This is part of our realignment plan for our K-4 and then a 5, 6, 7, 8 model. And then also proposing an assistant principal, which initially will be at the elementary level. And again, in the future, will be part of that grade level realignment in terms of being at the 5, 6 building. These priorities total approximately $2 million, and you can see that total there. And I just want to emphasize that as of now, all priorities that are listed here, including those that we're going to take a deeper dive into in just a couple of minutes, they are all part of the budget of the expenditures that were presented in previous meetings. So these positions have been built into the budget and the expenditures that the board has been introduced to. That budget currently includes a 5.95% tax increase. So that includes these positions in there. If the priorities were to be removed from those expenditures completely, that would take the tax increase to 4.1%. So tonight's presentation, as the first set of priorities, is going to focus on the four that are highlighted for you. Specifically, we're going to be focusing this evening on the interventionist, the step teacher, the student advisors, and the BCBAs. The remaining 7, we're going to take a deeper look at the upcoming meeting in April. The four positions that we're going to be taking a look at tonight, we were intentional. First of all, these are 4 positions that the district has had for the past several years, and they've been funded with ESSER funds. And so we're really fortunate that as part of the presentation tonight, as we talk about the vision, we also have practitioners or individuals who've been serving in those roles to be able to talk to you about their work and the impact that they've had on students, the overall culture of buildings as well. It's also important that we've grouped these positions together tonight for the presentation because they all represent work that's happening in Tier 2 and Tier 3 in terms of our MTSS framework that we implement in the district. And so I just want to take a very brief amount of time to give the board and the community a refresher on MTSS and what that framework is. Again, it stands for Multi-Tiered System of Supports. We're very fortunate in the district that we do have a framework in terms of those supports that we offer to all students K to 12. So elementary, middle, and high school, we have these supports in place. Tier 1 impacts all students, and that's what we refer to as our core instruction. And so what's really important for us there is that all students have access and opportunity to strong core instruction, a curriculum that's implemented with fidelity, research-based, high-quality instructional strategies. Clearly, a critical part to the implementation of that core or Tier 1 would be that we have ongoing professional development and regular opportunities for teacher collaboration. When we then take a look at Tier 2, Tier 2 applies to some students. And so Tier 2 includes research-based interventions that we offer that are designed to target a specific skill or behavior. Because when we talk about MTSS, we're talking about both academics as well as behavioral supports. It's important to note that Tier 2 is offered to some students, but it's offered in addition to that Tier 1 or that core. So all of our students are going to receive that core instruction, and then those who have an identified need based on assessments and data that we have on students, we are able to put those Tier 2 interventions or supports in place. Those interventions are trained by professional staff members. You're going to hear from some of them this evening, and they're typically offered in a small group setting. And you might hear a little bit how the size of the group might vary based on the particular level. And then finally, as we move up the pyramid, so to speak, to Tier 3, those are our most intensive interventions. They might be different interventions than those that are offered at Tier 2. They might be interventions that are perhaps offered for a greater duration, or it might be in an even smaller, more intensive group. So again, the positions that we're going to talk about this evening are really those that fall into either Tier 2 or Tier 3 category, and that was really why we saw the importance of taking those particular positions together. So at this point, we're going to jump into the specific priorities, beginning with the ELA interventionists. I'm going to just give you a frame of reference in terms of, it was probably about this time last year, my team and I stood before the board and talked about reading interventionists. We have 1 at each elementary level. And so at the secondary level, when we're talking about English language arts or ELA interventionists, those positions are comparable or similar to the reading interventionists at the elementary level. And here tonight to give you some greater insight to these positions, I'm going to call up Deneen Lashinsky and Aaron Murphy, who will go through some of the information with you.
Hi, I'm Deneen Lashinsky. I'm the instructional support teacher at Lower Macungie Middle School. And in my role, I support our interventionists as well as their students. So to begin with, we wanted to take a moment to define the role of an interventionist for everyone, but in particular for our new staff and new board members. So the role of the interventionist. As Dr. Campbell mentioned, through our MTSS framework, we do screenings on our students 3 times a year. And through that screening process, we use data to identify students in whether or not they have a need, a reading need. So we look to see, do they have a word level need? Do they have a comprehension need? And our interventionists are part of that data analysis team. They work then to establish within their group, their intervention group, in particular, like if they are doing a word level intervention, it might be an intervention like Orton Gillingham, where they're working with a group of 4 students. If they have a comprehension need, they may be working in a little bit larger group, maybe 10 to 15 students, and that might be in an intervention called Lexia. So they work in these intervention groups to deliver evidence-based interventions specific to each student's need. And then they monitor students by using progress monitoring data on a regular basis. And they monitor those students and their progress to help create instructional plans for students and to bring their skills to grade level, because ultimately that is our goal. We want to use FastBridge is what we typically use for progress monitoring, and we're doing that, like I said, on a regular basis because we want to then take that data and respond to it in a small group. So if we're noticing they are having difficulty with informational text, then we're going to implement some strategies in that small group based on that data and information. The interventionists also collaborate with me, with teachers, administrators, and families regarding student progress and to match student needs with appropriate strategies, practices, and materials. They regularly attend parent-teacher conferences, and they create progress reports that go home to families to communicate how their child is doing in their intervention. They also assist with building and district level professional development. For example, we're rolling out Keys to Literacy, so it's best practices in reading, and they take an active role in leadership in doing so.
As Dr. Campbell shared, last year the board approved the addition of reading interventionists at each of our elementary schools. Those positions were previously filled using ESSER funds. At the secondary level, we are experiencing a similar phenomenon. The systems that we built using ESSER funds now require continued staffing to ensure we can continue to provide that targeted support to our students with reading needs. As part of our MTSS model, we focus on servicing students that are below the 40th percentile, and we're using specifically screening data from our FastBridge A-reading and auto-reading assessments. On the slide, you see the number of students in our 6-8 buildings that are currently falling at or below the 40th percentile. So in 6-8, that number is 492 students. And the number of students that we're currently supporting. So out of that 492 students, we're able to service 401 of those students. Many of the discrepancies are based on either parent preference, if a student has additional needs, or if there is like a scheduling conflict, which is less of an issue at the middle school. So some of those discrepancies are based on just working with families and students and figuring out what really is the best for them. At the high school level, and I just want to remind everyone that we're very new to the MTSS process at the high school, even more so than the middle level. So at the high school, we really are just focusing on ninth grade. We chose to focus on ninth grade because we wanted to ensure that as students transitioned from the middle school to the high school, that they brought with them some of the supports that they had at the middle level. So you'll see that at the high school, there are 172 students in ninth grade that are falling below the 40th percentile, and out of that, we are servicing 124 of those students. Discrepancies in that number. This is where scheduling really comes into play. So students that have a lot of elective courses, some of them choose to not have the reading intervention because they want to take a specific elective. We do have considerations for students that are in LCTI, and we've developed a system for servicing them. So even students who are who are traveling to LCTI still have the opportunity to receive their reading intervention.
So at this time, the current budget proposal includes 1 reading interventionist at Lower Macungie Middle School, 1 reading interventionist at Ayer, and 1 reading interventionist at Emmaus High School.
And on the slide, you can see some of our current reading interventionists providing intervention to their students.
Small group interventions.
Okay, and then this final slide that Deneen and I are going to discuss is just an illustration of the difference in service availability should we lose these positions. So as we shared previously, 6 through 8, we are servicing 401 students. If we only work with the individuals that we have contracted to provide intervention, we would only be able to service 165 students. So really what we would be looking at is servicing students that instead of looking at below the 40th percentile, we'd be looking at students below the 15th percentile. And ultimately that group of students below the 15th percentile would mean that we would really be servicing just the students with IEPs. And right now we do have the ability to service any student that has a reading need, whether or not they have an IEP. Okay, thank you.
All right, the next priority that we're going to transition to is a STEP teacher, specifically for the middle level. Just as a reminder, we currently, and in just a moment, some of our team is going to remind you about the vision for the STEP program and the work that we do in that program. As a reminder, we currently have 1 high school STEP teacher, and that is a contracted position. That is already part of the district budget. So we're looking to take a current position that is ESSER funded and move that to a budgeted position. And so to talk more about the STEP program and the work of the STEP teacher, I'm pleased to introduce Sally Yencho, Jen Carolla, and Megan Freeman.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. And good evening. I have the pleasure of speaking with you tonight about our STEP program within our middle schools. STEP, or our Students in Transition Educational Program, exists right now to serve our students who are experiencing personal or external challenges which may be impeding their ability to attend school or be successful in the traditional academic setting. We have seen success getting habitually truant students or students placed outside of our schools for extended periods of time back into our schools through this STEP program. And through our MTSS child study process, we have been able to identify and support students, such as those students who may have suddenly lost a parent or guardian, students struggling with anxiety, dependency, and even medical conditions that prevent them from coming to school on a regular basis. This success is all due to the smaller, supportive, more individualized programming that this STEP program can provide. Within this setting, students can continue their academic work while also receiving in-the-moment social skills, coping strategies, self-regulation techniques, mindfulness, resiliency building, and executive functioning tools. Enrollment in our STEP program is truly meant to be short-term, approximately 4 to 6 weeks. However, it is individualized and can be extended based on the student's needs, circumstances, and their goal progress. This position that we're asking for the 24-25 school year is intended to be housed at Lower Macungie Middle School, and in the short term, serve both IR and LMS students. And as we think about our district realignment goals, this position is then intended to serve our 7 and 8 building. To provide you with a snapshot of the students that we are currently serving, we've posted some numbers up here to indicate how many students we are in the process of serving in this school year. To date, it's 34 middle school students across both buildings. And last year, we served 54 students at the end of the school year. As Mrs. Yensho indicated, we serve students who are facing a variety of barriers and challenges. But if we look to theme the reasons that we are enrolling the majority of our students in our middle level STEP program, it can really be broken out into 3 focus areas. The first is a large percentage of our students are requiring additional behavioral supports. So as Mrs. Yensho spoke to, we're providing de-escalation strategies, we're providing self-regulation techniques, and we are offering a supportive environment for students who need to remove themselves from the classroom environment to give them space and time to regulate. We also serve a number of students who are transitioning back from placements or other academic programming. And this small supportive environment helps reacclimate students into the larger student body. It helps give them an opportunity to catch up on academics that they may have missed in their absence. And furthermore, again, it provides a point person to help them navigate the reentry back into a building. The third area which Mrs. Yensho also identified is a large percentage of our students enrolled in our middle level STEP program are students that we are working with for school avoidance reasons or students who are beginning to show patterns of truancy. And we look to intervene in a way that, it, again, provides an environment that helps us try to attempt to get to the trigger or the area of concern to help ease the students' anxiety and help them feel more welcome and that sense of belonging in the building. While most of the students that we serve on a part-time basis, meaning that they are out in some of their general education classrooms. We do serve some students on a full-time basis. At the start of every entry into the program, we do formally hold an intake meeting, and the plan is always to titrate down the amount of support. So the goal is always to return students back to their regular schedule, but in a way that works for them in an individualized program with the supports to help them be successful. When you break down the percentages of students, I think it is important to note, as we're asking for one position for a contract, that the majority of the students that we are serving, middle level, are in 7th and 8th grade. So last year, 83% of the students that we served were 7th and 8th graders, and this year to date, 82% of the students we are serving are 7th and 8th grade. So in our planning process and looking forward to realignment, we feel it is most important to maintain a STEP program in the 7th and 8th grade building, and we believe we can build in supports through personnel as well as other supports, social emotional supports in the 5th and 6th grade building to provide the same level of care and intervention for students who may need it at the younger age.
Good evening. My name is Megan Freeman, and I am the STEP teacher at Lower Macungie Middle School. As mentioned by my colleagues, STEP supports middle-level students throughout the school day and our parents and guardians in addressing barriers to student success within the home and community. I took some time to reflect, and I identified 5 major impacts that the program has had and continues to have on our STEP students and families. Promoting well-being. Within the STEP program, I work with students to bring awareness to their feelings and behaviors. Our mental health impacts our success. I advocate for student mental health support and address barriers without stigma or discrimination. 2, enhancing academic performance. Students who experience barriers with school may have difficulties concentrating, completing tasks, or simply just getting into the building on time on a regular basis. Sometimes those barriers are more significant and can have life-altering consequences for our students and their families. Within the STEP program, I address these topics, connect with our families, connect them with resources, and address support systems so our students can get the help they need to thrive academically. 3, preventing a return to alternative placement. Mental health challenges may push our students into alternative placement programs outside of the East Penn School District. When students face untreated mental health, they may disengage from school or engage in maladaptive behaviors, which places those students back into alternative environments like hospitalization programs. Within the STEP program, I work with our families to get services in place with outside service providers like Mars, K&S, and Pine Brook, so our middle level students can reach their full potential in school, home, and community, and remain within our middle level buildings of Eyre and Lower Macungie Middle School. 4, creating an inclusive environment. Within the STEP program, I have created a space where students feel supported and valued. I work closely with all staff members and educators at Lower Macungie Middle School to make sure the environment is conducive to learning and growth as our students transition back into their regular building schedule. And 5, building emotional resilience. Building emotional resilience not only improves academic performance, but also enhances the overall well-being and success in the long term. Within the STEP program, I teach students specific emotional regulation skills, stress management techniques, and healthy coping mechanisms. These resilience building strategies help our students navigate challenges and setbacks, and they're able to generalize them back in their regular education classroom environments. These 5 points are all interconnected and essential for creating environments where all middle level students can thrive academically, socially, and emotionally. Over the last year and a half, I have asked STEP parents for their feedback on the program at Lower Macungie Middle School, and I wanted to share some of that data with you tonight. 100% of the parent respondents, it was 18 out of 18 parents, identified positive behavioral change in their students' daily performance. Our students are coming to school. 100% of our parent respondents identified positive behavioral changes in their students' academic performance. Our students are getting their work done because they are coming to school on a more regular basis. And 100% of our parent respondents identified positive behavioral changes in their students' attitudes about school. Our students want to come to school, and they are building relationships with peers and staff alike. One final question I pose to our families is, what would schooling look like for your child if STEP didn't exist at Lower Macungie Middle School? And this is always the part that gets me choked up. All of the respondents had shared very negative impacts. If this program didn't exist for their student, they had mentioned that their child would be in alternative ed or back in hospitalization placements. They would be retained. They wouldn't be moving on to the next grade level because they were not coming to school and failing their classes. They would continue to have poor relationships with peers and teachers, school counselors, community members and friends. Families would be going to court for fines and truancy. Sometimes those fines are up to $800. And finally, social and emotional deterioration. The STEP program at Lower Macungie Middle School has helped many students thrive academically and emotionally, and it has been an honor to work in this space with our students and families for this last year and a half. Thank you.
We're also very fortunate for several years to have had student advisors in each of our secondary buildings, again, funded through ESSER funds for the past several years, and now we are looking to make those permanent members of our district team. So here this evening, we have Tom Roof and two of our student advisors currently at Emmaus High School, Lenny Jenkins and Gerald Brown. Again, we're going to follow a similar process in which you'll first hear about the vision for the positions, and then our two current student advisors will talk a little bit about the impact that they've had on Emmaus High School.
Good evening. This is a position that we're very lucky to have two gentlemen that I really enjoy interacting with, and then the two middle school student advisors are two equally fantastic people. So we have four very strong, very mentor-focused individuals in these three school buildings. And again, as the superintendent shared, we're looking to solidify the two contracts at Emmaus High School, one at Iyer and one at LMMS. So looking back over a year and a half ago of what the purpose or vision of this position was, we're looking at the secondary buildings and looking for additional support that is really non-traditional. So when you talk to other people in other areas about what this position looks like, they kind of scratch their head because it's very different than something that is in either Lehigh or Northampton County. So looking at people that are building appropriate behavioral, social, emotional intervention strategies to support student well-being and success, again, non-traditional. So you're thinking about non-traditional pathways. If we think traditional school is hyper-discipline focused, this is outside of that realm. Participate actively in the school data teams. So when we're talking about MTSS meetings and collaborating in that to say, these are the things that I can offer, or these four gentlemen can offer to support student success in school. And that's looking at, how do we get kids into class? How do we keep kids in class? And how do we support that process to make school a more welcoming place? Supporting the administration in providing logical, timely consequences that are in line with the code of conduct, and promoting accountability and positive learning. And that's really the key. When you look at volume, the one thing that these gentlemen are able to do is really have a very deep impact in terms of having what is a more restorative conversation, a more restorative approach. And the one thing that, I'm very comfortable saying, all four of them, it is a situation where they've built relationships with students, where when a student comes there, it's like when you come to your grandparent and you're saying you feel disappointed because you look up to these people so much. And the four, that comes really naturally for these four gentlemen. And it's really critical that they are so important in that role and that their abilities in that role are really important. So it's not just here's your consequence and go. It's a conversation and moving forward from there. Maintaining regular communication. These are people who are part of the team, very deeply involved in the team with the entire administration, school counselors, students, and their families. Sharing progress, coordinating support, and effectively working to build this process out and to make sure that students are successful. And then it's really just about supporting and cultivating a safe, nurturing atmosphere. If students don't feel safe, they don't feel valued, they don't feel respected, they don't come to school. And every person needs one person to make them feel that way in school. And this position has really changed who that person is for a lot of people. When we look at the impact, and I'm just going to share briefly like an overview here, and then I'm going to let my two friends here speak because they're the people doing the work. The impact is really profound. So to get an idea of what we're talking about in terms of student connections, we have a process where the students sign in when they meet with the four gentlemen. So these four people have completed over 2,500 individual student contacts as of today. It's a huge number. And when you think about those 2,500, and I use the word targeted very specific because these are people that have been identified in the data collection process through the MTSS process as students who need somebody. So these are targeted student interactions where students are effectively 2,500 contacts with people when they need someone deeply. And what these contacts look like are, generally just providing support and advocacy for someone. Enhancing, appropriate student conduct. Conducting check-in, check-out is a huge component of this. When I looked at the data and the connections that these four gentlemen are making, each one of them, over 50% of their interactions are non-disciplinary. So over 50% of those 2,500 contacts are being done in a way that is, pushing students to be the better version of themselves and not just doing it through, what is an extremely traditional punishment. They're implementing restorative practices and having a real deep impact in terms of a mentor. And then they're doing the impact that they have on the culture. And, the interesting thing is I picked these 3 pictures to be very purposeful, because what you see in these 3 pictures are 4 individuals who are not just there in the boundary, but they're people who are engaging with faculty, with staff, with students, and with the community. So I'm going to invite Lenny and Gerald here to really explain what those impacts really look like.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lenny Jenkins, and I just have a few comments to make on top of what he just said. But before I begin, I'd like to thank Dr. Campbell, Ms. Whitman, and Ms. Carolla for helping us get this thing started and providing the support, as well as the 4 assistant principals who've been providing a wealth of information and guidance throughout this process. We're very busy up at Emmaus High School, as you well know. But the excitement comes from the restorative practices portion of what we're doing. What we're able to start to do now is form relationships with the teachers and the students together, so we can bring them both to the table and try to intervene and provide some relief for the teachers. They're very busy. They don't have the same time as we do to focus on this when they're teaching classes. We're also able to provide a safe space for these kids to come. Sometimes they just need to come out and reset, like it was mentioned earlier. They need to leave the classroom environment, and they have a safe place to come to with us. It's a situation where we mostly provide just listening to what they have to say, not judging them, making them feel safe and free to come in when they want to. The whole emphasis of what we do is based on forming good relationships. We're able to acquire a wealth of information from the students when you just sit back and let them talk, let them present themselves. They're not used to being listened to, and that's what we decided to provide for them. At this point, I think I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Mr. Brown, and let him go on a little further. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me take this up a little bit. Yes, my name is Gerald Brown. I'm a student advisor here at Emmaus High School. Many of the kids call me the BFG. That's what they know me as, the big friendly giant. I tell you the truth, being a tall guy from Texas, I didn't take lightly to that at first because I wanted them to fear me. But I understand, and I've grown into that name, and I can't shake it, so I use it and leverage it. Like Lenny said, we've been able to build some incredible relationships. Last year, I was a hall monitor. I purposely came in as a hall monitor because it allowed for me to be able to walk with 2,800 kids and connect and build and have a touch. Sometimes there's a lot of kids who are lost in the shuffle, 9th graders coming in who may not be as, I know I'm not allowed to say this, but I'm gonna say it, please forgive me for saying it. They're vertically challenged as opposed to me. I'm not as vertically challenged, but it allows me to reach down sometimes and make eye contact with a kid who feels like they haven't been seen. And I give them a smile. Those relationships go a long way. Having them drop in from time to time and have a touch, just them come in and saying hi. Some days I'm not having a good day, and they'll come in and brighten my day. But providing a safe place to build on what Lenny said, last week, I want to talk more from a testimonial standpoint. We've heard statistics, we've heard those numbers, and those numbers don't lie. We all know business. Bottom line, numbers tell the story. But I want to tell the story of the kids. I might tear up a little bit because I do care. As I told you before, I'm from Houston, Texas. I've been here now for the last 3 years. And when we moved here, when I left Texas and I brought my family here, I have a son who's in 10th grade. I have a daughter who goes to Irish. She'll be a 9th grader here. I have a son who is at NYU. And when we built our home here, I was telling Whitman this story earlier today. When I first got here, I didn't know Emmaus. I lived in the Lehigh Valley. but I didn't know Emmaus at one point. I walked through the city just to get a little touch, just the sense of what the atmosphere was like. And I stumbled upon a billboard, should I say, a mural. And the mural said, Emmaus, a community united for progress. And that stuck out to me, and it resonated with me. And I spent a year pondering on that. How can I use my gifts? How can I use my talents to impact the greater community? And I walked into a freshman orientation one day, and I saw Miss G, and I saw Jordan standing there. And I walked in with my bubbly attitude like I always have. I'm an outgoing guy. And how can I help? How can I be used? I want to give my gifts away. And he said, go online and apply. And I thought about being a substitute teacher. I've done that before in the Allentown School District. But I said, what better way but to go in as a hall monitor and reach 2,800 kids and touch them every day. Lo and behold, I spent a year doing that, and it's led me to this position as a student advisor, which I truly, truly enjoy. The kids, the stories that we hear, and the touches that we make, it goes beyond just the kid. We're now able to build relationships with teachers. We talk about restorative practices. When a kid comes in and we talk to them about a punitive referral, often the kid is the only one saw and the only one talked to and the only one who receives the discipline. What we've come to realize is in order to be a full restorative practice, we also have to heal and mend the relationship with the teacher. And we do have a few stories this year that came about through a teacher who really cared for a kid and said, look, I don't want this kid to continue to get in trouble in my class. What can I do? So when the kid returns, there's healing in the process. So now the educator the kid can feel comfortable going back into class, and the educator can continue to teach. We've had several teachers do that, and when the kid returned back to the class after having a conversation, and we were just the advocate, we were just sitting there and watching the two dynamics come together, the teacher talking to the student and them coming to an understanding. Now the student returns to the class and academic success and healing is happening. That's the true definition of a full restorative practice. We've had several kids come in, and by us being there on campus, share with us and say, hey, you know what? Now that I see you and Mr. Jenkins in the role that you are in and in the capacity that you're in, I want to be a teacher now. What can I do to become a teacher? I'm inspired to be a teacher. So our role goes beyond just advising. We wear many hats. Like you said, on many days, we walk out and we both looking at each other. When you taking your nap? What time are you taking your nap? But it's worth it. It truly is. And I hope you guys continue to consider having us here beyond Ezra Funds. Thank you.
The one last thing I want to share, because the two gentlemen from the middle school aren't here, and I'm not going to read these, but it really speaks to the complete package of what Mr. Jenkins and Mr. Brown shared, because we really hit the jackpot with the four people that we found. I'm not going to read the entire paragraphs, but if I draw your attention to the Lower Macungie component, right in the middle of the paragraph, it says, if it was not for his student advisor, I do not believe he would have been able to turn his behavior around and start each day with a positive attitude. And then the final sentence in the Iyer parent testimonial says, every school deserves a Mr. B who will be a champion for all students. So, it's very hard, to listen to these wonderful things, and you think about who these people are, but it is, the special sauce is in the people, and we have four very, very powerful people, because it starts with their personality and their recognition in terms of, can I make a transformative action through, as Mr. Jenkins said, through my ears, and really then it's through my words and my actions, because a lot of people can say a lot of things, but then it's backing that up with how do I support these students. So these positions are transformative. I'd be willing to take these 4 gentlemen on the road show and go around because they really truly are the emblematic of what the expectation was of this position, and they are doing that job every day. It is not lip service. So in terms of consideration, this is a job, these are positions that I don't believe we could live without. And I don't say that lightly. Thank you.
And finally, we're going to investigate a bit further the board certified behavior analysts, similar to the other positions that we talked about. These are positions that we've been funding with ESSER funds. They've been contracted, they have been through an outside provider or contracted services. So they have not been in-house district employees. And so what you're going to hear in just a moment is Jody Freed is going to speak to us about the vision for making the BCBAs district employees so that we no longer have to contract with an outside agency.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell, and good evening. That was a tough act to follow, but I'll do my best. Very well done, gentlemen. The vision for the 2 board certified behavior analysts, or BCBAs, is to provide behavioral programming to our autistic support and emotional support programs and classrooms throughout the district. BCBAs use applied behavioral analysis, which is the study of why people do the things that they do and how behaviors can change. BCBAs do this primarily through assessments called functional behavioral assessments, or FBAs. During an FBA, BCBAs will look at the behavior or behaviors of concern and note what happens directly before the behavior occurs, which is called an antecedent to the behavior. And they also note what happens directly after the behavior occurs, or the consequence that maintains that behavior from happening or continue to happen. And what they do is they analyze those antecedents and consequences and manipulate them to develop positive behavior support plans, which help to shape challenging behaviors into more appropriate behaviors that are suitable for an educational program. In addition to conducting assessments, BCBAs provide training to staff and parents on challenging behaviors. They also can serve as part of the multidisciplinary team to support our multi-tiered system of supports and also provide development to the IEP team. In addition, and I'll talk a little bit about collection of data, that they do collect data on a consultative basis to our general education teachers by observing student behavior and then providing consultative services on classroom management strategies. I also want to note that, as Dr. Campbell did say, we currently contract these BCBA services through an outside agency, where the BCBA services are provided to students on an individual basis through their IEP. And with the addition of these 2 BCBAs in our autistic support and emotional support programs, these services would be able to be provided to all of those students within those classrooms. Thank you.
Okay, and so that wraps up the first round of budget priorities that we're presenting. As always, our team is here. This might be a bit of musical chairs, as depending on the topic of the question, we might ask some members of our team to come up. But before I turn the floor back over to our board members, I just also wanted to conclude and really share that I hope that you appreciate and understood that ultimately, the vision for these new positions is very important, as we've established that vision several years ago. I think equally important is the follow-through, the continued reflection of how are we doing, what's the impact that these programs or personnel are having, and that continuous improvement or refinement process. But ultimately, perhaps what's most important for the success of these programs and positions is finding the very best people to be in those positions. And so I just wanted to give like a tremendous shout out to all of the team members that you heard today, ranging from our building leaders, our district leaders, to those who are serving in some of these innovative and unique positions and really taking a risk on us and being along as part of the journey ultimately to better serve our students. So at this point, we'll certainly open up to questions, Dr. Levinson.
Okay. Well, before I open the floor to the board, I just want to thank the team members that came tonight and presented significant detail about the roles for these particular priorities, and then relating the impacts that they have had during the time that they've been here, and helping to understand why they deserve to continue. Okay, I'd like to open the floor to questions from the board. Mr. Smith?
Thank you all for your presentation tonight. It was, and hopefully my colleagues will share my energy. That is one of the most invigorating presentations I think I've ever had. Certainly from and my apologies to Mr. Saul, but certainly one of the most invigorating budget conversations I've ever happened to have before. And just fair warning, most of you are coming up to say a couple words. So I'm just going to go kind of in order. And first thing we heard about was the budgetary impact. Mr. Saul, feel free to check my math, but I believe that the price tag on he's getting his pen ready. The price tag on all of the positions that we talked about would amount to a 0.9% increase if we were to accept just that portion we heard about tonight. So as we're thinking about all the wonderful things we heard tonight, that is the price tag that I have in my head. So, and I'm also going to argue that it might very well be some of the best 0.9% we've ever spent. I'm going to start with just a quick, going in order. We heard first about MTSS and the different tiers. One of the things that I appreciated about some of the presentations in the past was some of the graphics that we use kind of really illustrated the visual that the different tiers are overlapping. It is not from 1, then to 2, then back to 1, and to 3. It's like these are things that are available to all students as they need them, and they move in and out of them with a lot of flexibility. So with that in the back of my mind, I was thinking about the scenario where potentially we didn't have the interventionists if they were not part of our priorities. And if we were to go forward with that, one of the slides, I forget what number it was, I'm scrolling through here, but the sense of needing to then work with the 15th percentile versus the 40th percentile, and that there was a highlight there that the 15th percentile was typically going to be where most of our students with IEPs would be located, and so that got me thinking. And for all my wonderful special educators who are tuning in, please do not take this to mean that I'm trying to put more workload on you. I'm definitely not doing that. But my thought is, for the interventionists, you mentioned that they're also going to be working with a lot of our IEP students. My question is, where's the overlap between services provided by a case manager, let's say, versus an interventionist that would come in? I do not want to put us in a position, and this is why I led with this, I do not want to put us in a position where suddenly case managers are taking on the work of the interventionist. I'm just curious about where that overlap plays out, how that plays out with some of those kids that are in that 15th percentile.
I think to start, I would just share that right now at our middle level, we have a model in place where our special education teachers do teach some of our reading interventions. So at the middle level, we call it reading seminar. So our special education teachers by and large, teach at least one period of reading seminar or teach reading intervention. They spend the remainder of their day providing push-in support. So they're either co-teaching or supporting a core classroom teacher. So while those students that are on their caseload are in their core classes, those special education teachers are in those rooms. So that's sort of what their model looks like right now.
And as far as the overlap with case management, it is not required that the case manager delivers the intervention to the students. And the case manager sometimes does do that. However, if they do not, they collaborate with the interventionist or whoever is providing that intervention to then collect the data and report out on special education progress, as with their report cards and their IEP progress.
Thank you for that. And my thought, going back to the tiering comment, is that as our interventionists are providing some of those tier 2, especially the tier 2 interventions, we're really, for my colleagues who may not have heard this originally, we're really kind of hoping that, our kids that need those interventions would come in for a period of time, 6 weeks, let's say, no longer need that intervention, then move back out. So it's a flexible in and out, as kids need it kind of a thing. That 15% or below, you stand a much higher chance of that having not a lot of moving in and moving out. You're going to be needing some pretty intensive supports. You're not going to be likely meeting those goals in the same time period as some of the kids that would be found in the tier 2. That's all the questions I had for that first part. So thank you both. The next question is just a very quick one for the STEP program. If we could take a look at the bottom of slide 13, I'm going to come back to that in a second. My first question, though, is and you may not have a rough number on this, what's the average amount of time, school days, let's say, that a student spends? Again, this is one of those tier 2 interventions in and then coming back out. What's the average time would you say that a student spends in that STEP program?
It really is a difficult question to answer because the program is so highly individualized based on student need. And when I talked about students titrating down their level of support, a more intensive, like a tier 3 intervention or support, could extend for 6 weeks, and then we would try to bump it down to a tier 2, where maybe they're just coming in for a small group or a check-in, check-out, and then we bring it down to a tier 1 where hopefully they can resume, but then still have that checkpoint. So I would honestly say, on average, the majority of our students do spend far more than 4 to 6 weeks in the program overall. Some students are looking at a full trimester, sometimes 2 trimesters, and it really depends on the reason that they're there in the first place and the challenges and barriers that were impeding their success. So again, to the point of that slide, we intend for it to be short-term, but that looks so different depending on the level of student need and the circumstances surrounding the decision to enroll in STEP.
Sure. Okay. And then the last part for this piece I had was to comment for my colleagues. And I take a look at the bottom of slide 13. The question that was posed to parents was, what would schooling look like for your child if STEP didn't exist at LMS? I can tell you that the type of program that we're discussing right now, and the advisors as well, which I'll talk more about in a second, those are not programs that are found everywhere. And I can tell you for a fact that every single one of those 5 bullets can and will happen in the absence of programs like this. So thank you. I'm absolutely thrilled that we have been able to provide our students with this through ESSER funds. I don't see them as a luxury. I know that they were implemented with a purpose, both outside, from a federal aspect. Here's the purpose for these funds, but they were also used purposefully here in East Penn in a way that we can provide these kinds of supports for kids. So, fully in support of this as well. And then the last comment I had, not really a question, Mr. Jenkins, Mr. Brown, thank you both for being here tonight. We have heard so much about you, and I'm so glad to be able to put a name to the face. And the way in which you spoke with us tonight, it is plainly obvious why kids come running to you, why kids look up to you, why our kids need this kind of program. I was blessed to have teachers that I looked up to, Mr. Pierce in science, a coach, Mr. Mazzetti, providing those same sorts of relationships that I needed when I was in a similar stage in my life. And I think about the coincidental nature of those kinds of relationships. Like, I just happened to be in that science class. I just happened to have Mr. Mazzetti as a coach. But what you offer, and the team of the four of you offer, is for all of our kids that need it. There is no coincidental nature. Like, if you're there, if kids need you, they're there. So I can't thank you enough for all that you do, and I am fully in support of every single cent spent on those programs we heard about tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Smith, you should say what you mean.
Sorry.
Okay. Thank you for those comments. Board.
Thank you. First, I just want to thank you all for the presentation and the information that is incredibly valuable. And I had to be honest. My first thought was, can we do more? Can we do more? The students deserve everything that's being done. And so kudos and applause for that. I only have one question. I'll try to be brief. And I just wanted to ask, what are some of the barriers to equitable access? Could you give some examples? And could you give me an idea generally how the STEP program addresses those?
Just to clarify, equitable access to the STEP program? So really, we have broken down the barriers to ensure that any student who needs support is able to access it in a way that's meaningful for them. And it is, as Mrs. Freeman spoke to, it is such an inclusive environment, with that being a priority, that any student that brings any range or host of barrier or challenge is accepted, is embraced, and is supported through that process. And so that is our mission, that is our goal, and it is delivered with fidelity in both of our middle schools as well as our high school on a daily basis.
Thank you. I feel like applauding. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Ms. Ford. Ms. Klotz.
I just have a comment. So my daughter attends LMMS. I know some of you know her. I would just like to throw my support behind the programs. I know students I know specific students that these programs have helped, and they have definitely made a positive impact. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Klotz. Ms. Bowman.
Yes, echo the positive praise. Have definitely heard from parents who really shared some heartfelt stories about really not believing their kids would be in school at all if it wasn't for specifically the STEP program, but also to be able to have that person in their life that they feel they don't want to let down. And like Mr. Smith said, for some of us, when we think back to our own high school career, for me, it was a coach and my journalism teacher. So thankfully, I had two people. Maybe that's why I stayed on the straight and narrow. But, we can't, that's not always the case for our kids. So we need to have people in the school that kids feel understand them. And it was wonderful to hear this. I do have a few... they're not really questions about these positions because I was here on the board when we originally approved all of them with ESSER funds. But I have more, I guess, high-level questions about the budget and how these fit into that. The first question, though, is when we originally approved most of these, our thought was that we were recovering from the pandemic and we were using, in one way or another, these positions to either help try to overcome learning loss or to heal some of the social rusting that was going on with kids not being social for so long and then coming back to school and having behavior problems. So now we're 4 years out of the beginning of the pandemic. And I'm wondering if the administration can speak to the new needs of these positions. Obviously, we probably still are going to have learning loss until the kids who were in kindergarten and first grade at the pandemic finally get to 12th grade. But were these positions things that we always needed, or are we looking at always needing them in the future? Has the new need changed?
So I can tell you, I'm going to start with the STEP program because that's a slide that's up. I actually had a similar program as an assistant principal in 2011. And in that district, I had a much smaller budget. We used that to basically be cost avoidant for the costly amounts spent on alternative placement. So again, when we do budget analysis, it seemed very short-sighted to cut a transition program like this for the power that it had and also the cost avoidance. It's hard to talk cost avoidance till you go through the program and you've gotten to follow it now here at East Penn.
Yes.
Student advisor, I'm going to say a similar thing. The power in the student advisors is proactive instead of punitive and reactive. It is, again, not looking for alternative placements that right now, frankly, don't exist in this county. They're very hard to come by, even more so if it's a special education student. So it's a continuum of services that we have, and for the volume of students we have here is extremely needed, and I think it's shown its power. And so that was just, if there was a silver lining to some of the difficult things that we experienced through COVID, I do think it was the ability to pilot these things in front of you in this district, and then again, share the stories and also the data.
Okay.
As far as learning loss, COVID kindergartners, we still see an impact in COVID kindergartners. They're currently the 4th grade. And we'll continue to share data with you, but we are so attentive and as a leadership group meeting almost like on a trimester basis to take a look at the data. We just had early warning data step backs, and we're following and doing the best we can to, again, I think remediate some of the learning loss that was experienced for kids.
Thank you for that. Is this the last year of ESSER? And if so, are there positions that we added with those funds that we're not continuing?
We have, and the board will be getting an update in terms of our remaining ESSER funds. We do have, I'm going to ask Mr. Saul to double check me, but I think it's about 1.2 million in ESSER funds remaining that we would use for the 24-25 school year. We are still finalizing what specific positions those ESSER funds will support, but an example would be math interventionists at the secondary level.
Okay.
So you've heard about the ELA interventionists tonight, but certainly we are, as we finalize that list, we'll share that with the board in terms of what we anticipate. And to answer your other question, yes, unfortunately, there have been some positions. I'll give the example of we currently have a STEP teacher, which we talked about as a contracted teacher at the high school. We have a STEP ESSER funded at Lower Macungie Middle School and a STEP ESSER funded at Ayer Middle School. And so we had to make the difficult decision in terms of being strategic and looking at the vision down the road. We see the benefit of a STEP teacher and program at the 7-8 building. We see other supports in the future being essential at the elementary and the 5-6 building. And so that's where having to make that difficult decision of not continuing 2 STEP teachers at the middle level for next year. Again, just one simple example of, yes, every year we have to continue to identify those priorities, and some of those positions will not continue to be sustained.
I am happy to hear. One of my other questions was what is happening to the math interventionists, so you answered that. I would have been concerned if that was ending, given our how we're doing on our math scores. small question, just confusion, I think. At one point, I think we had student deans and student advisors. Are they all student advisors now, or do we still have student deans? Are those different?
They are different, and so there is a dean position that's currently at one of our middle schools because an administrator who was in that position was serving in another role, again, through ESSER funds. And so that person has an administrative cert and was filling in an administrative position. So that's where we call that position a dean.
Okay.
And they were primarily doing certainly more discipline that's associated perhaps with some of our assistant principal positions.
Is the proposal here to only have an advisor now, or is that school going to have both?
That building will continue to have their 2 assistant principals, which they always had.
Guess I'm a little confused on that, but I'll figure it out with the slides. Okay, I think mostly I'm just trying to understand how it all fits in with the budget, and part of my confusion is I know we need to have, and we haven't talked about it yet during budget season, and maybe this is an upcoming presentation, but I don't see it on the list of presentations. We need to raise taxes so that we can have money to pay the bond. When is that supposed to happen? Or is any of this budget set aside for that?
Yes, the millage phase-in plan that was developed as part of the study is fully incorporated into the budget that we have been reviewing.
Okay, so I'm kind of going by memory on that, but if I remember correctly, it was like 3 or 4% a year. I can't remember if that was both of the plans added together. Is that what's included here?
Yeah, it was roughly 1.25% per year.
Okay.
I think it could be 1.2, but 1.25 is a ballpark.
Okay.
And so again, that's fully incorporated in terms of there's multiple moving parts there. Staffing, millage increase, use of debt service fund, not debt service, capital reserve fund. So all of those moving parts are fully incorporated.
Okay. It'd be helpful if at some point you could show how all of this breaks out, because, well, you haven't gotten to those yet, but maybe next time, because that's when you get to your phase-in positions. What are those part of this 1.25%, or are they part of the, sorry, I'm getting all my percents mixed up that got broken out, but I think I have it written down. You had 4.1% that was like fixed costs, and then you said the rest of it was the priority positions. I'm not sure if those priority positions are I'm not making, you understand what I'm saying?
I do. Yes, some of the items that are included in the priorities, the entire list, not just this evening's, the entire list, are part of that millage phase-in plan.
Okay.
So just sort of very high level, as an example, if there was a decision made to not approve some of those positions this year, we would actually have to go back and look at the millage phase-in plan and almost recalculate it.
Okay.
Because it wouldn't be phased in the way that it had been designed.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
It does. I'm just trying to figure out what's leading to the different things that are in this budget, which ones are leading to the increase, so that we can make some decisions. Okay. At one point, we're going to have a presentation about the high school, and we never had it. And because what we start doing this budget season is going to start us down a road, and when does the board hear more about that construction project?
We don't have an exact timeline at this point in time. I will say, I believe the discussion originally was that the board was supportive of looking first at the K-8 in terms of the elementary and middle school needs and beginning those projects and having Certainly, there's work in terms of coming back to the board with multiple pieces, including what that project will actually include, and then more concrete costs associated with that particular project. Potentially those projects actually getting underway before the board would then reconsider the needs at the high school and which option might best meet those needs. Because at this point, as you can appreciate, the numbers that we're working with are meaning the potential costs associated with the K-8 option are still very conceptual in the absence of concrete plans.
Exactly. Okay. The last question is going to sound off topic, but you know, I've been on the board long enough that things come up, and then they don't come up again, and I'm not sure if we've walked away from this or if it's like not enough of a priority to actually get on the priorities list each year or what's going on with it. But when we approved, for example, the code of conduct, one of the visions was to eventually have this in-school, out-of-school suspension. But it's been almost 2 years at this point, or a year and a half, and we haven't done it. Have we like walked back on that, or is that some off in the future? Like, what's going on with that?
We haven't walked back on it. I think one of the challenges we have right now is a space issue over here. We currently have Vespa in the one occupied space. We would need to be able to find a space for the OSS room, and we've had some other priorities come up, including trying to figure out how we might turn spaces that we have in the high school into a wellness space. And so we have competing needs, so we've kind of shelved that for right now.
Okay, that's helpful.
But not forever gone.
Not forever.
Yeah.
So it's a priority, but not
Yeah.
one of the higher priorities.
Again, I think in the absence of a space where we would have that individual and that program, to bring just the position to you almost doesn't necessarily present the whole picture of the need.
Okay, that's helpful. I guess that's all I have for now.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Bowman. Additional questions? Mr. Flagey.
I'd like to thank you for the presentation. To Mr. Smith's point, it was really great. And walking in here, you look at this kind of money and say, how are we going to figure this out as a taxpayer, right? But when you hear what happens and, you know, everything that seems to be going on here, you pretty much sold me on it. So kudos to you. But I guess my question is, of course, it always comes down to money, right? Mr. Smith did some back of the napkin math over there, right? 0.9%. What would that roughly be to the average assessment of a taxpayer for, I mean, I don't know if you have that off the. In other words, if we were to move forward with this part of the priority, right? It's a 0.9%, right? Do we know what that equates to?
I don't have it at my fingertips.
Okay.
At the next meeting, we'll be getting another update, and it will include it. I guess my thought is I would also caution you, because you've only heard a portion of the priorities.
Right. Okay.
So to try to break out just that piece and say, well, here's what it.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious as to what that, because I know when we sat here, did the interventionist for the elementary school, I know Ms. Bowman always likes to ask that question, because I think it's important to understand, right? It's important to understand and sit here and say, you know, for this amount of money, in my mind, it is worth for every student out there to have every opportunity they can, right? To a certain extent, you know, and for me, of course, it was my own elementary school, you know, my son, and get all into that again. And I just see how it works. I know how it works, right? So we have great news. You know, I get the news. My son's gone from tier 2 to tier 1, right? So he's calmed down, right? He's able to read now, you know. And you sit here as a parent and say, or as a taxpayer and say, you know, for this amount of money, to me, it's still worth it. So, you know, you guys did a great presentation, and as I stand right now, you know, don't hold me to it, but I'm willing to move forward with these programs. So, thank you.
Thank you for that. Additional comments, questions? Okay, well, I do think that my colleagues, raised some very good points and asked some very good questions. I think it's given this group a lot to think about moving forward as we contemplate potentially adding these priorities to the district budget. I just had a couple lingering questions from some of the stuff that was presented. For the step teacher, it was disclosed for the entire 22-23 year, there are 54 students. 23-24, 34 to date. Do we expect that number to go higher?
Yes, those numbers are continuing to roll in and will continue through the remainder of the school year. Sometimes spring presents its own set of challenges with things going on in students' worlds and families' worlds. So we definitely anticipate that number will increase before the end of the school year.
Okay, thank you. And this was a practical question. Of the positions that were discussed tonight, where are they going to land in the organization in terms of bargaining groups or?
The interventionists and the teachers are, as well as the BCBAs, I believe, are all contracted positions. The student advisors fall outside of the bargaining group.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and the 2,500 interactions that were quoted for the student advisors is certainly an impressive number. And does that represent individual students, or does that include repeats?
Yeah, so that's actually from a tool that we use in their offices to sign students in and out. So that's 2,500 unique sign-ins.
Okay.
Into each of the 3 or 4 individuals' offices.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's all I have for now. Again, I'd like to thank the team that presented this evening. Again, compelling arguments for their impact and again why we should be considering them for continuation. If there's no further questions on this, we'll move on in the agenda.
Thanks again to our team. We might ask you to come back next month just because you were so successful tonight. Thank you. Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you.
I like it over here.
Okay, next item on the agenda is personnel. May I have a motion to approve the personnel items?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions from the board? Seeing none, Ms. Allen, please call the roll.
Mr. Falegi?
Aye.
Ms. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Ms. Klotz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Before we move on, I think Dr. Campbell would like to say a few words.
I did. I just wanted to recognize the retirees that appear on this evening's agenda, including Meredith France, who's retiring after 14 years of service with us in East Penn. She's certainly been a critical part of our special education department, having served as a supervisor in multiple levels. And so we certainly wish her well as she begins her retirement. We also wanted to recognize Ryan Harrington, again, effective at the end of the school year. He'll be retiring. He's currently a music teacher and our band director, and so I know that he has been very impactful on the program and on students and their families, and will be missed greatly, and certainly all important roles, but that's really a unique one, and certainly big shoes to fill there. We're also recognizing Jane Shingler, who's retiring. She's currently teaching communications at Lower Macungie Middle School. She retires after 18 years with East Penn and a total of 29 years in education. Kira Werner's retiring from Albertus Elementary. She has 21 years of service, all in East Penn, and she served. She's been at Lower Macungie Elementary School when we had that building as our kindergarten center, and then most recently she's been at Albertus. And finally, we wish to recognize Joey Terfinko, who's currently our head custodian at Lower Macungie Middle School. He's been in East Penn for 36 years. I've had the pleasure of working with Joey when he was our head custodian at Lincoln when I was there, and certainly in his time, he's been at Lower Macungie Middle School, Lincoln, Wescosville, and Emmaus High School. So we wish him well also.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Campbell. Next item on the agenda is business operations. If there's no objections, I'd like to get a motion on items A through D taken together.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any comments or questions from the board? Mr. Jankowski?
I have a question, perhaps Mr. Onesko, you can answer this. With respect to the bids for the synthetic turf at Willow, looking at the pricing that came in, I mean, that was pretty disparate across the board. And I'm just curious how, 5 companies could come in with such different bid amounts. I mean, they're not even close. It's just
Yeah, well, the lowest bid did not bid on the whole project.
Right.
He was just looking at providing the artificial turf itself. Why everybody else came in at different various total costs, I really don't have an answer for that. Some of it, I think, goes back to how busy somebody is to actually do the job. And some of it may be who has the expertise in doing that particular type of job. Some of them were general contractors, where other ones were an excavator. So I think it depends on their expertise where that number came in at.
Okay. And then when we set the budget amount for this, I mean, again, is that the same story? Pricing was different at that time than it is now, or because again, we were talking like over double what we had budgeted.
So you're referring to the artificial turf?
Yeah.
No, when I originally had that budget, I looked at 2 outside companies that came in and gave numbers. I believe once I hired an engineer to design it, it became much more involved with the stormwater, the drainage, and everything else.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Any more? Ms. Bowman?
You might as well stay there. I think. This is just to really refresh my memory. I might be remembering wrong, but there was some effort at one of our elementary schools. I thought it was this one, but I might be incorrect. To have to create an accessible playground. Was it Willow Lane or was it?
It's actually Macungie Elementary.
Okay.
And that work is continuing.
Okay. Would this, if we had been able to do synthetic turf, have helped in that regard? I understand you can't put a wheelchair over mulch, but I guess you can you're going to have real grass there now.
Correct.
Okay.
Although the turf was not, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, the turf was not under all the playground equipment area. It was actually a separate
That's correct.
play area.
Oh,
That's
okay.
correct.
I see. Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bowman. Any additional questions? I guess before we vote, I'd just like to thank both the Lions Club of Emmaus and the United Way of Lehigh Valley for their generous donations to our EHS clubs. No further questions. Ms. Allen, please call the roll.
Ms. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Ms. Klotz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Falegi?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Moving on to curriculum. If there are no objections, I'd like to take items A and B together.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, Ms. Allen, please call the roll.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Ms. Klotz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Falegi?
Aye.
Ms. Ford?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson.
Aye.
9 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Under curriculum, item C, we have a presentation on the 2024 to 2027 Special Education Comprehensive Plan. Dr. Campbell, would you like to introduce?
Yeah, very briefly, because I know they will also give the background to the plan, but it's my pleasure to introduce Jody Freed as well as our team of supervisors who I believe she will introduce to you, who have been critical in helping to develop the special education plan. This is a process through which all school districts in Pennsylvania must go every 3 years in order to complete a special education plan for their district. The items that Mrs. Freed and her team will go through, which are the essential components of the plan, are really guided, or the direction is given to us by the state. So there might be pieces that you might be wondering, well, what about this? Again, the special education plan has specific components through PDE. I'm also going to mention, I might be repeating a little bit of what our team will share in just a minute, but the plan is available for the public to view and offer feedback for about the next month. And so there's no action that the board is taking tonight. We're simply presenting. We'll certainly hear feedback, questions, and then we will bring the plan to you again in April, ultimately for the board to take action on the plan at a later date. And so at this point, I'm going to turn things back over to Jody Freed, who's our Director of Special Ed.
Good evening again, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Campbell. At this time, the Special Education Administration team would like to present to you our special education plan for the school years of 2024 through 2027. Before we get started, I'd like to recognize our Special Education Administration team that's here with me tonight, who will help me present our plan to you. First, we have Mrs. Taylor Maddox, who is the supervisor overseeing our elementary special education programming. We also have Mrs. Jen Layton, who is our middle level supervisor. Dr. Dan Cullen, who oversees special education at Emmaus High School, and also Ms. Carly Harrell, who is our special program supervisor. She oversees our students in the district, K-12, in our autistic support and emotional support programs, and in addition, students who receive supports outside of the district. As Dr. Campbell stated, an overview of our special education plan. It is an action plan that describes our commitment to ensure that students receive a quality education to our students with disabilities who are eligible for special education services. This plan describes our special education programs and services that are provided within the school district, and also those special education programs and services which are accessed by the school district from outside of the district boundaries. This plan is regulated through Chapter 14 of Special Education Regulations through the state, which states that each district shall develop a special education plan that is aligned with the school district's strategic plan. And this plan should be developed every 3 years and is consistent with the 3-year review cycle of the strategic plan. The timeline for our plan this year, we actually began planning earlier in the year in January, where the administration team started discussing the essential components that are required of the plan and really what we want to focus on. We decided we wanted to focus on our least restrictive environment component of the plan, which is where we had our committee members focus for our committee member team and feedback. That took place back in February, on February 15th, where our committee came together and discussed our least restrictive environment services and programs. On March 15th, that component was completed and shared with our committee members, and they were all given the opportunity to provide feedback to our plan prior to this evening. We are presenting our plan tonight on March 25th. The plan will be on display for public review on our district website for the next 30 days, at which time on April 22nd, we will ask the board to submit a motion for approval of our special education plan, and then it will be submitted on or before May 1st to the state. Here's an overview of our committee members. We had a very robust committee. Not everyone was able to make our committee meeting, but our least restrictive environment services and programs that we discussed were sent to all committee members in order to get their feedback following the meeting. We did have administrators from the district level, building level. We also had K-12 special education teachers and general education teachers, in addition to several parents who were on the committee. And we also had Mrs. Ford, who was our board member, committee member. And at this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dan Cullen, who will talk about an overview of our components.
Thank you, Mrs. Freed. Board of Ed, it's nice to be here this evening. When you speak publicly, they tell you to do three things: be bold, be brief, and be memorable. Tonight, I'm going to keep it brief. Thank you. In the spirit of keeping it brief, it's nice to point out here our indicators. There's 16 that really guide our planning process. They're governed through the Office of Special Education Programs, through the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Special Education. So this year we are under compliance monitoring, cyclical monitoring for indicators 13 and 14 for secondary transition. So we're going through that this year ahead of being monitored next year by the Bureau of Special Education. They will examine the other indicators that are governed by federal law and state regulation. All right, let's look at the components of the plan. There's 10 in all. These 10 different components highlight different facets of our special education programming. Here on this slide, I want to just really bring our attention to two. The least restrictive environment and our out-of-district placements. When you look at continuum of service, you're really looking at a continuum of comprehensive services that are provided to students in the least restrictive environment. Nature and needs of students really dictate that level of support and services that are needed throughout that continuum to extend to our list of approved certified out-of-district placements. So it's both. It starts in the school, in the general education environment, and works its way to serving students to the most appropriate level out of district. Okay, and I also want to bring attention to our identification method. It's important to note that we have a non-discriminatory process for evaluation, and we utilize a discrepancy model to evaluate our students based on their level of need. All right, looking at the next 5 components, positive behavior support. We have process and procedures in place, and really highlighting that component, the board approval that we're seeking for board certified behavior analysts really helps enhance our capacity to deliver most appropriate supports and services there. They really understand the science behind the behavior and are able to plan accordingly. Intensive interagency, we offer instruction in the home to students who require that level of most appropriate support. We have an education program that really looks at those 3 levels, the itinerant level, the supplemental level, and the full-time level, where we provide services and supports. We have our special education facilities plan, where we have to the square foot, identify specific classrooms that meet specific requirements to support students across their continuum. And then, of course, we have our special education support for district employees that do not case manage. Our instructional assistants, our related service providers, our school psychologists, and our special education administrators make up that core group. School nurses as well. Thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to Mrs. Freed.
So when we talk about least restrictive environment, I wanted to start with a little background on what least restrictive environment is. If you turn your attention to the left side of the arrow represents a continuum of services. And on the left side at the top, you'll see that the least restrictive environment for students is considered when students are placed with their peers and receive 100%, or they are included 100% of the day in the regular education classroom. And if you go down to the bottom of the arrow, which represents the most restrictive environment, this is where students are not placed with their peers and they're receiving special education services 100% of their day. If you turn your attention over to the right side of the continuum, you'll see that the regular education class does align with the least restrictive environment. This can be provided in multiple ways to students. Some students do not receive any special education supports in the regular education class, while others might receive indirect supports from a special education teacher or on a consultative basis. This might be where a special education teacher consults with the regular education teacher of the class to discuss modifications and accommodations that are provided to students within the class. They may also receive direct special education supports within the regular education classroom. This might be where a special education teacher or interventionist is pushing into the classroom and providing a specific intervention, perhaps in reading or in math, or they're actually receiving co-taught instruction where there are two instructors. One typically is a core content teacher and the other is typically a special education teacher. As you move along the continuum, the next least restrictive environment would be considered a special education classroom, where students might receive instruction for parts of their day, possibly in an intervention or a replacement curriculum, or they might be receiving supports for their entirety of the day in the special education classroom. Once students' needs meet the level that we are not able to provide those needs within the district, we look at a separate specialized school, primarily for students who require high-intensity behavioral and mental health supports that they're not able to access within the school. They go to a private school on a daily basis. Moving further down the continuum is a residential school where students are placed and reside at the school year-round and also receive their special education instruction there throughout the year. And finally, the most restrictive environment on the continuum is considered instruction in the home, where students are confined to their home for various reasons and are unable to be supported within a school environment. So when we talk about least restrictive environment, this is a screenshot from our Penn data report. What we are required to do as a district, along with other districts throughout the state of Pennsylvania, is provide data to the Pennsylvania Department of Education on a yearly basis. This is typically called our child count, which occurs every year on December 1st, where we are required to report the students who are receiving special education services, how they qualify, as in what disability category they fall under, and then also the amount of time that they're receiving special education supports within the general education curriculum or regular education classroom as well. So when you look at this chart, you'll notice that this is based from the December 1st child count from 2022. That's because every year when this is turned into the state, they take quite some time to analyze it, and the numbers don't come out until that following school year in August. So as I reflect on numbers and data throughout this presentation, these numbers represent the data that was taken from last school year, so please keep that in mind. As you can see on this chart, as far as the number of students who are receiving special education services inside the regular education classroom, 80% or more of the time, that tells us in comparison, when you look at the pink bar on the left, that's our district level. At 80.9% of our students in special education are receiving services in the regular education classroom in comparison to the state average of 61.6% of students in special education. So that tells me that we are a highly inclusive school district, that we are providing a lot of special education supports to our students within the regular education classroom. As you move to the right, you'll see the comparison of the district as far as students who are receiving services less than 40% of the time in the regular education classroom. And as expected, you could see we fall below the state average ever so slightly. And as far as students who are receiving special education supports in other settings, we again, as of last year, were below the state average. I wanted to draw your attention to some national trends in special education. This was a summary that Marker Learning provided to me that they took from a CDC study. as far as the trends in special education over the last 20 years. So here what they're trying to tell us is that the amount of students basically that have been identified for special education has increased quite significantly over the past 20 years, especially as you look at eligibility categories of students with autism. You can see that it went from 1.5% in 2001 up to 12% in 2021. As well as students who are identified with other health impairments, this classification tripled in size in the past 20 years. And through the past 10 years, over 1 million additional students have been identified for special education programming throughout the nation. The last thing I want to draw your attention to on this slide is on the left-hand side, when you see the chart, the dark blue on the very bottom, that represents the number of students who are identified with a specific learning disability, which is typically our largest category of eligibility that students fall under. What you can see in the last 20 years, that has actually decreased across the nation. So you're probably asking, okay, how does this relate to East Penn? So I took those disability categories that we just talked about throughout the nation and compared those over 15 years at East Penn School District. So as you can see, the numbers of students, or the percentage of students identified with autism in the district, has more than tripled in the past 15 years. The same with students identified with other health impairments has more than tripled in the past 15 years. And then you could also see that last category that I pointed out in specific learning disability has actually decreased in the last 15 years. So East Penn School District is on trend with the nation as far as identification of students enrollment by their disability category. We typically think that students who are identified with that specific learning disability has gone down primarily because of the increase in students who are being identified with other health impairments. And as far as the increase in students with autism, we believe that through the public, parents, educators, and the awareness of people who are considered neurodiverse and the change in categorization of autism spectrum, that far more people fall on the spectrum of autism, therefore qualifying them for services in that disability category. In the LRE, we also look at the percent of students enrolled in the district with a disability. So again, I looked at the past 15 years of eligibility and compared East Penn's eligibility percentages with the percentages of the state average. So basically, when we look at this graph, we want to be hitting that red line. That red line represents the state average in Pennsylvania. As you can see in 2007 and 2008, in the earlier years of this 15-year span, we were not hitting that state average. So we were actually under-identifying our students back at that time. And then over time, we've seen a gradual increase in our identification of students with disabilities in the district, where around 2017, 2018 is when we started being on trend with the state average. As you can see, post-pandemic, after the school year 2020, 2021, we start to see a slight uptick in our special education identification enrollment numbers. This is large in part to two factors, I believe. One, the increase of concerns in behavior and mental health that we have seen in our students. And also this correlates with the alignment of our K-12 MTSS programming that has been implemented throughout the district at that time. So we are catching more students who we're finding eligible for special education as well. So an overview of the overall percent of special education student enrollment as of last year, we had 1,594 students receiving special education services in the district out of a total of 8,005 students, and that comes to a percentage of 19.9% total. From the 2021 to 2020 school year, we did see an increase of 0.6%, which is higher than the state average by actually 0.6%. The state average right now is at 19.3%. Numbers to know, again, that 19.9% of students who currently receive special education supports. We offer 5 different supports throughout the district, including autistic support, emotional support, our enhanced learning support program, our learning support program, and speech and language support. And we offer all of those on 3 different service levels, including itinerant support, which is the least amount of support a student can receive. Supplemental would be about the midline of support that a student can receive, and then full-time, which is the most support that students can receive. And now I'm going to turn it over to Taylor Maddox, who will discuss our programs at a glance throughout the district.
Good evening. So looking at our elementary schools, we have the 7 elementary schools, and at each building they have learning support. So the number of learning support classrooms we have at each building just depends on the number of students. At Shoemakers, where we have our emotional support program, which is a specialized program, and then at West Coastville Elementary School is where we have our autistic support program. The Life Skills program, which is run by the Carbon Lehigh Intermediate Unit, is at Albertus Elementary School. At the high school, we have all of our programming there. We have learning support, emotional support, and autistic support, and they also have the Life Skills program there run by the Intermediate Unit. At Eyre Middle School, we have a full range of programming there. We have emotional support, autistic support, learning support, and an enhanced learning support program there. Lower Macungie Middle School, they have emotional support, learning support, and that is also where they have their life skills program. We also offer a variety of related services, so speech and language services, OT, PT, and those are all needs-based, individually designed for the student depending on their needs. So looking at those continuum of services, we have the consultative push-in support, which Ms. Freed spoke a little bit about. So if students just need something modified, that's the lowest level of support. Then we offer IA support. So that would be an instructional assistant that would be in the classroom working with students, working with the teacher. We also offer co-teaching support, which is really that special ed teacher and the regular ed teacher working hand in hand all day, really co-planning, a really collaborative approach. And then that final support we offer is a pull-out support. So that is really taking that student out of the classroom, offering a high level of support, a replacement curriculum, and we see that with a very small percentage of students. So that's it.
Last, to sum up the least restrictive environment, I want to talk about briefly some of the initiatives that our special education team would like to see throughout the next 3 years of our special education programming. First and foremost, we'd like to see a continuation of our K-12 MTSS, along with solid Tier 1 instruction provided as preventative measures in correlation, or not in correlation, but in conjunction with our Office of Teaching and Learning. We'd also like to expand to a full continuum of services at the elementary program and continuing to offer inclusive practices by allowing intervention and enrichment in both ELA and math on a daily basis. We'd like to also see a gradual increase of mental health, behavioral, and functional supports for our emotional and autistic support programs K-12. This includes additional psychologists, board-certified behavior analysts, social workers contracted through Carbon Lehigh Intermediate Unit, and the anticipated opening of an IR Life Skills Lab this spring, where we are expecting students. It's actually a simulated apartment where students throughout the district can come visit on community-based instruction and learn independent living skills. So we're really looking forward to adding that to our program. In addition, we would like to implement equitable practices through a continuum of supports and services at our middle level program, which we will discuss more through our MTSS and Special Education Facilities Committee, as how we plan to align our district programs or our specialized programs like autistic support and emotional support and our enhanced learning support programs at the middle level, along with the continuation of ELA and math interventions at both middle schools. We'd also like to increase opportunities for intervention and in ELA and math at Emmaus High School through a more robust continuum of services and classes that are offered. We additionally want to continue to build on inclusive extracurricular opportunities for students of all abilities, Currently, we have the Best Buddies program, which is at Eyre Middle School, the PALS program at Emmaus High School, Unified Track and Field is at Emmaus High School, and we're starting Unified Bocce program at Eyre Middle School as well this year. And finally, we'd like to be able to research the feasibility of expanding our district-run programs to include life skills support classrooms K-12. Currently, our life skills support classrooms are in district that house our students as well as students outside of the district through Carbon-Lehigh Intermediate Unit. We are seeing a need for students to utilize this program more readily, especially when we have children who are enrolling in the district who require life skills support in kindergarten through second grade, where currently the Carbon-Lehigh Intermediate Unit does not have a classroom in Lehigh County to support those students. So then their choices within district are either a learning support program or an autistic support program. And next I'll turn it over to Jen Layton, who is going to discuss our positive behavior supports.
Good evening. Supporting our students' social, emotional, behavioral learning is a top priority for us. The positive behavior supports on this list are examples of how we do that. Now, this list is not exclusive to special education. You'll see some items on that list that were discussed this evening, such as student advisors, STEP, restorative practices. But there are a number of students who utilize these services, who also receive special education services. And also, these services help provide us with some help with identifying students who would benefit from an evaluation to see if they are eligible for special education services. You'll see that there are a lot of items on here that are partnerships with places in the community, such as our Carbon-Lehigh Intermediate Unit. They provide social worker in some of our emotional support classrooms. They also provide support with trauma-informed practices. We do utilize ABA supports for, you've heard this term this evening, BCBAs, and also RBTs, who are registered behavioral technicians, for individual students in our autistic support and our emotional support programming through their IEPs, through a need through their IEPs. Communities and schools is also utilized. We utilize social emotional learning at the elementary level to help students identify those feelings and how to regulate them. And we definitely want to continue to support students and families through interagency supports that provide that wraparound service, also to assist with truancy and that multi-tiered support for families. We also want to continue with de-escalation in crisis situations through CPI, and just overall support students in the best and healthiest ways that we can.
And now I'll introduce Carly Harrell, who will talk about our personnel development for the plan.
Hello. We're really happy actually that this is a required part of the special ed plan, because I think it draws everyone's attention to the importance of making sure that all of our students are supported by well-trained, well-informed adults in all of these topics that you see on the left that are definitely important parts of their programming for many of our students. So we need to plan trainings as well as figure out who will provide them, who they will be provided to, when they will be provided. In autism, behavior support, we need to make sure our paraprofessionals or our IAs are well trained in what they'll need to be doing. The teachers need to know how to conduct reading instruction using the science of literacy. Our secondary teachers are being trained in post-secondary transition everything. We are working to improve our parent collaboration and training, and everyone is learning more about IEP development. So just to highlight some of the things, in our autism category, we are working on introducing new curricula at our various levels of autistic support programming that helps our students learn life skills or functional skills in addition to their academics. And we will be training staff in how to do that, as well as how to do functional behavior assessments at a lower level than a BCBA would do, but that way our staff can get going on that a lot faster and do some more minor behavior interventions without needing to add in more people until that may prove necessary. As far as our parent engagement series, we have already started that. So we have hosted some coffee talk with parents focusing on various topics that would be relevant to them and plan to continue doing so. So the world of special education can be confusing and complicated even to us as administrators. So we are recognizing that for parents that may be even more complicated or confusing. And we also want to make sure that these important people in our students' lives have a voice and a way to communicate with us priorities and needs. So those topics listed are just a sample of things that we would be incorporating into those engagement series. Warning signs of disabilities, the special education process and evaluations, breaking down the IEP, etc. Another area to point out would be IEP development. So we are partnering with the law firm of Sweet Stevens, who is leading us, our teachers and our administrators actually, in a pretty in-depth series of trainings about how to create high-quality IEPs and breaking down those components like measurable annual goals and appropriate specially designed instruction.
Okay, and that wraps up our presentation on our special education plan for the next 3 years. I'd like to send a special thanks to all of our committee members on their help and participation in developing this plan, and also thank the board for your ongoing support in special education. And I did provide 2 links at the bottom if you wanted to look into more background information on terminology or the Chapter 14 regulations overseeing the special education plan. And now's the time for questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Freed. Thank you to the group for presenting tonight, and I'd like to echo your gratitude to the team that helped assemble this entire plan. I'd like to open up the floor to questions from the board. Any comments or questions?
Just one comment.
Sure,
Just
Ms.
thank you. It was very engaging to be a part, and I just wanted to say thank you, and I appreciate the work that's being done and all of the efforts that are going into really just impacting the lives of our students. And I know that the group did a lot of dialoguing and a lot of ideas and generating of those ideas, and it's not easy, especially when you have a large group, but you guys managed that very well, so thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate the feedback.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Jankowski.
Yeah, I'd like to just echo Ms. Ford. I really appreciate your passion for this cohort. I mean, that's the first step, and without your passion and your work, we wouldn't have this. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Any additional comments? Ms. Bowman?
Yeah, on slide 20, I think 21, where you list the LRE, and some of them are continuing status quo, but some are expanding. And can you explain a little bit about how that'll be worked in? Like, some of these, to expand them, would require personnel, and I'm guessing that some of these are actually priorities that are in our current budget that we're talking about now, but I don't know that all of them are. And if you could just give a sense of like how those will be phased in.
Yeah, so currently the school psychologist will be presented in the budget priority round 2. I already presented on board certified behavior analyst today. We'll see how hopefully adding 2 to our programming help support our students, but there is a possibility that if the trend continues to move upward with the increase in behavioral supports required in emotional support and autistic support, that we may possibly need to look at more, especially as we look at the increase. We do have an increase in numbers of students who are receiving placements outside of the district in the last 2 years. And by adding additional behavior supports within the district, we hope to prevent that from increasing. Currently, we do contract with CLIU for a social worker who is assigned to K-12 to our emotional support program. Currently, most of those needs are being met at the high school level due to mental health needs that are needed and supports that are required with families, and helping families get those supports outside with other agencies that the social worker may know of and be able to get them in contact with. And then as far as the opening of the Life Skills Lab, that is something that is currently funded through our special education department and in conjunction with Ira Middle School to open that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you for the question. Mr. Kelly?
I was actually going to ask about the same slide, but the second bullet, the expanding. Can you just comment on the difference between what's going on now and what the expectation is for to continue the inclusive practices?
Yeah, so in the past, I believe around 2000, up until 2017, 2018, the majority of students in special education were served at the elementary level in a pull-out program and were not included with their interventions in the general education class. So what happened then, there was a push for inclusive practices, which we do support, of course. We want to see as many students being supported in the general education classroom as possible. But with that, students were mainly being supported in the classroom, and however, not necessarily a full continuum of supports was being offered, where we hope that the majority of students are being able to be served, their needs be met in that general education classroom. However, we recognize that the least restrictive environment may not be the general education classroom for every single student. So therefore, we wanted to develop a more robust continuum of services that can include that consultative model for students who need less supports, to that IA support or the co-taught support or push-in support of a teacher providing that intervention within the classroom, but then also still allow for students who may need it to have a pull-out support or pull-out intervention, not necessarily a replacement curriculum where they would be in a special education classroom throughout the day, but maybe they leave the general education classroom to receive an intervention where ideally we would want to see all students in that gen ed classroom, but a lot of students struggle with executive functioning and attention and focus, where getting that intervention in a classroom full of 25 students may not be the best environment for them to learn. So therefore, we want to still be able to provide that support in an environment that is most conducive for their learning. You're welcome.
Okay, any other comments? I'd just like to close with a comment and then a couple questions. First of all, supporting special education in East Penn, I think is very important to this district, and I believe wholeheartedly that this is recognized by this board, and so, we truly appreciate the breadth of the supports that have been outlined tonight. I do have two, hopefully quick questions. The first is, what are the metrics that are going to go along with tracking the success of this plan for the next 3 years?
Yeah, so as far as the metrics that go along with that, I have created a 5-year plan where a number of these initiatives are on, where I am tracking at the start date when we start these initiatives and continue on until they are concluded or implemented. So I'm tracking that way. But as far as Tracking, we look at data as far as our Penn data report that goes to the state every December with our child count to see yearly or annually what our numbers as far as inclusive services are. So we use Penn data reports. We also use local data as far as our benchmark testing and individualized data through the mastering of IEP goals as well.
All right, thank you. Then my last question, slide 14, which is the bar chart and tracking the red line for this for the state average. Looking at this, it made me think about what could be going on here, and I might be able to answer this question myself, but I'd like to get your thoughts on it. So, does this suggest, because again, both our bars and the red line are increasing with time. So do you feel that special ed needs are just generally increasing among our student population, or do you think it's our ability to identify and diagnose what's going on, and that ability is increasing and kind of tracking things that's not been there all along? Or do you think it's a combination of both?
I think it's a combination of both. There's been an increase of awareness of special education with parents, with physicians, who often will tell a parent that before diagnosing your student with something like ADHD, they will suggest that the parent request an evaluation through the school district first to see if they're eligible for special education services. So that certainly does increase that. And then also, as you said, the awareness of the school in general through our MTSS program. I think we've become better with identifying students who are eligible for special education.
Okay. All right, thank you. Are there any additional comments? All right, again, I thank the team for your presentation tonight.
Thank you.
We'll see if we get any comments in the next 30 days. Okay, moving on. Next item is policy. We have a number of new policies and updates that are going for a first reading. Would the administration like to introduce and navigate for us?
Okay, good evening. So we do have 5 policies to review this evening. It's really 2 main policies, and then there's 3 policies that are supported by the changes in the first policy I'll review. So if it's okay with the board, I'll go through the first policy, lump the next 3 together, and then go through the last policy.
That sounds good.
Okay, so policy 254 is a new policy, educational opportunity for military children. So this policy is as a result of Act 24 of 2023, which requires school districts to develop a policy to allow children whose parents or legal guardians are active duty military members and members of the armed forces and have received official military orders to transfer into or within Pennsylvania and to enroll in a school district prior to establishing residency in the district. So essentially, this policy is to make the transition into a school district easier for families where it's very difficult to move. And so there's a lot of transition, a lot of movement, and so to make this easier for those students. So I'll just pause at this point and see if there's any questions on policy 254.
Mr. Jankowski.
Just, this is more of a matter of process. So the parent must provide proof of residence within 45 days after the arrival date. What happens if they don't?
And I think we'd have to go through a process of like anything else where we'd investigate, are they actually going to be moving into the district? And we'd have to, at that point, involve the solicitor to see what are the next steps.
Okay, so there's potential where if there's a hold up in the closing of the house or something like that, there's opportunities for the student to remain in the district while this is being worked through. But at the end of the day, if someone's just playing games with us, this could lead to removal from the district.
It could, sure.
Okay.
I just have a quick practical question. East Penn isn't in the vicinity of really any military installations. Do we have any cases that come up year to year?
I don't, well, I don't want to speak to exact numbers, but we do not, this does not impact us much at all.
Okay.
So
Still
it's a
good.
required policy.
Sure.
Through PSBA for legal reasons and through school code, but as
Sure.
far as how it impacts us, it does not impact us much at all.
Okay, still good to have in place, like you said.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so moving on, policies 200, 202, and 217, they're really as a result of the new policy 254, educational opportunity for military children. So the updates to these policies it's only as a result of this new policy. So there's additional language in there because of policy 254. So at this point, I'll just ask if there's any questions on policy 200, 202, or 217.
Any questions? Does not appear so.
Okay, thank you. And then the last policy, policy 903, public comment in board meetings. The title of policy 903 was changed from, or at least in the draft, is changed from public participation in board meetings to public comment in board meetings. The focus there is to help with the purpose of the Sunshine Act requirement for residents and taxpayers to be provided with a reasonable opportunity to comment on matters of concern. This policy also addresses the authority of the presiding officer to take action, including specific circumstances which are outlined in this policy. So that's a brief overview of policy 903.
Okay.
If there's any questions,
Thank you.
I'm
Are there
happy
any
to take them.
comments or questions from the board on this? Ms. Bowman?
Yeah, let me tell you, on page two of 5, maybe, it has two things that seem a little contradictory. So the bold addition of the board requires all public comment to be made at the beginning of the meeting. But then right after it, it says if the board determines there's not sufficient time at a meeting for public comment, it can be deferred to the next regular meeting. But we're saying that public comment is happening first before the board business. Does that mean like if we have 100 people here and public comment takes more than an hour, you can cut public comment off and do the rest later? Or like, what is it actually saying there?
I'll take it. So your answer, excuse me, your question is actually correct. So that the board can set a limit as to the amount of public comment they will receive that night. So let's say they set an hour limit. However, there are 100 speakers that are going to take more than an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Any speakers who have signed up and want to be heard have the opportunity to come address the board at the next meeting.
Okay.
To have their comments made. So it's actually not contradictory. It's actually a statement right in the Sunshine Act.
Okay.
And just to add to that, just for the second sentence you read, that's actually not a change in the current
No,
policy.
I know. I
So,
just
yeah.
I just wanted to make sure I understood what it actually meant.
Okay.
And then same sentence. So normally we have our public comment around the end of the first part of the meeting. I don't, like tonight's meeting, it was in section 1, but it was C. Does this mean that would have to be like right after the call to order, or as long as it's in section 1 of the meeting, it's considered at the beginning of the meeting?
I believe it's just before any action is taken.
That's correct. I think the only time we've now changed it over the last year, so perhaps there's a student presentation rather than the students having to sit through public comment. We've moved the students up first, but essentially it happens right after that.
And we could still do that with
Yes.
this? Okay.
Yeah.
I think those are all the questions I have.
Okay, thank you for those questions. Any other questions? I actually have one general comment. I think as a board, we should all be grateful that PSBA has made a decision to update this policy. As someone who's sat in this chair for now a third year, I'm very grateful to have this spelled out in much more detail. I do have one possible correction on page 3 of 5 under the public comment section. It says individuals shall wait to be recognized by the presiding officer before commenting, must direct all comments to the board. I know in the statement that I've been reading from meeting to meeting, I talk about directing all comments to the chair. I don't know if I'm being too nitpicky on this, but is it better to say the chair, or well, I can understand why it says board because you want them to talk to the board, but I'm requesting to address the chair.
Okay, sure. We can take a look at that language for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But other than that, I think certainly in light of recent court cases and things in the news, this is a very useful policy to have in place. Are there any additional comments? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, next item, are other educational entities for the CLIU. Dr. Whitney, do you have a report?
Thank you. The CLIU Board of Directors met on March 18th. Full transparency, I was not in attendance at that meeting. I was not able to be there. I was traveling. But I do have a summary of what was covered at the meeting. There was a presentation on the Adaptive Bikes program, which is something that occurs every year. And on February 22nd this year, the Carbon-Lehigh Special Needs Children's Foundation, which is the foundational arm of the CLIU, in collaboration with an organization called Variety, a children's charity out of Pittsburgh. They presented adaptive strollers and bicycles to children with physical mobility difficulties in Carbon, Lehigh, Schuylkill counties. And if anyone is looking for a 2 to 3 minute shot in the arm of happiness and good feeling, I would encourage you strongly to go to the CLIU.org website. And the first video you'll see there is from this most recent presentation of the adaptive bikes and strollers. And it's important to note, so these are provided at no charge to the families and the children. And it's just a remarkable thing that the foundation supports. So that was a really nice presentation. There was an update on a grant, a federal grant called Project Aware, which stands for Advancing Wellness and Resiliency in Education. We had an update on the progress of that grant. That grant is awarded. It's a collaborative project between the CLIU and 2 other IUs in Pennsylvania. The main goals of Project Aware are to provide universal access to mental health screening for school districts, implementing suicide awareness programs, including student-led prevention groups and training curricula for students and staff. So among other things, this includes the Evidium Club, which MAS High School has a chapter of, and other types of interventions like that. And third, develop a web-based resource for locating behavioral health resources within specific zip codes. So the update that we received is that the Project Aware Find Help website has been developed and is expected to be released to the community and schools by the 24-25 school year as a way to move this forward and provide better access to resources and information on mental health. The 24-25 Special Education Facilities Plan was approved, and the major new developments there is 1 additional classroom in Lehigh County for multiple disabilities functional support, and that's application to be determined. And then CLIU is going to explore alternative locations for both the Allentown Learning and Achievement School and the Lehigh County Enhanced Autism Program. There's a determination that the current facilities for those 2 programs are not adequate and not conducive to the best levels of learning. So they're going to be exploring some alternatives to those, and we'll receive updates as they happen. And then finally, the 24 through 27 comprehensive plan for the CLIU, which has been presented a couple of times now, was approved. The goals essentially are for, in 3 years, to develop better professional staff retention and better professional learning and development of CLIU staff. The plan was approved, and we will move forward. And that's my report.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Whitney. Are there any comments or questions from the board? All right, appreciate your report as always. There are no other items, so moving on to announcements. The board met in executive session this evening to talk about legal matters, confidential matters, and personnel items. The district is going to be closed from March 28th through April 1st. Our next regular board meeting is on Monday, April 8th at 7:30 in this room. With no further business, may I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Meeting adjourned. Have a good evening.